So, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome here our next speaker, Zora Hesová, who is an analyst with focus on religious movements and secularization. She graduated from political science at the Sciences Po in Toulouse, and she also has a degree in philosophy and Islamology at the Freie Universität Berlin. Currently, she is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Philosophy at the Charles University, and I pass you the floor. The title of her contribution is "Contested Religions of Balkans Between Nationalism, National, Ideological and Theological Claims." Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to this very interesting debates. My task was to speak out the Balkans, and now I see that actually I could have focused on one specific case, but actually I will take a sweeping view of the Balkans, because I'll try to make a small counterpoint to the topic that was announced to me at first, the misuse of religion. Why the Balkans would actually be the picture case of the misuse of religion. We all remember the so-called religious wars of the 1990s, in which nationalism, violence, and religious fanaticism, in some ways, or passions, have re-entered Europe in surprising ways in the 1990s. So yes, Balkans would be the case. But actually, and I've started traveling to the Balkans and following the wars especially, and traveling to the Balkans in the 1990s, right after the wars, and I've studied Islam in Bosnia quite a lot, and I've come to a different conclusion. It's wrong to speak about the misuse of religion, and I'll try to say a few arguments for that. So to set the picture, you all know it. The area is multi-ethnic, multi-confessional. How does it? Yes, no, yes, and it's this is actually a wrong map. If the map should be much more detailed down to the villages. It used to be, and it still is, a very complex picture of religions that we expect. I mean, that we consider a kind of this we consider kind of a problem. When I speak about the Balkans to students, I always say there were no religious wars in the Balkans, obviously. The reasons for violence are totally different, right? They lay in nationalist aggrandizement, in the dynamics of federal Yugoslavia, in criminal opportunism, popular fear, and the dynamics of escalation. So when I speak publicly, I always say there is no religious wars in the Balkans, obviously. But here I would like to say, actually, there is a lot. I mean, they were religious, there is a lot of religion in politics. Politics is inseparable in ways that I will try to define, and I will try to be quick. I will, my experience with the Balkans have led me more and more to actually perceive politics during the wars, and especially afterwards. I will make a lot of sweeping claims that are not totally true in details, and I can answer questions if you want afterwards. I will make divide the last period into 3 decades more or less: the wars, the 1990s, then the 2000s, and the current last 10 to 15 years. And religious role in politics has increased during this time, and was important in the beginning, and has actually transformed itself. And I will now define or describe very briefly 3 ways in which, or 3 categories in which we can speak about not a misuse, but maybe a fusion or an impossibility to distinguish between politics and religion, or religions, and I will then qualify religions. And at the end, I'll speak about a certain resistance to it. So my perspective is politological. I'm not a theologian, but I will come back to a theologian position at the end, which I found, which I meet a lot in the Balkans, that I find interesting. So, in what sense are religions implicated in politics? So this would be the misuse idea, right? You have criminals that have been often blessed and promoted by ecclesiastics. Here is Radko Mladic, Vojislav Šešel. Here we see the Islamic Brigade. It was actually a defense brigade. But religions have been involved in the wars themselves in the 1990s in a very different way. So they have to do with, and I will now be very broad but quick, they have to do with the national developments in the Balkans. We have 7 countries in the Western Balkans. I speak mostly now about the Western Balkans, in which there are Slavic and ethnic groups. There are 3 main religions, 3 main language groups: Serbo-Croatian, Albanian, and Macedonian. And in the course of history, these groups have coexisted in various empires, mostly mixed. Then have developed national identities, have claimed some kind of autonomy, then have gained political autonomy, and have actually made states. And in this process of distinctions between peoples, religion was the code, the marker. Obviously, we have seen language and religion are the markers. So in this sense, religion is important. It has. There were 2 other important. Several other important dimensions to it. The Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg Empire have actually maintained a large degree of mixity, and in the course of 19th century, people got unmixed. This is the term of Rogers Brubaker. The people were defined on the legacy of Ottoman Empire, legacy of millets, in which religion was your nation, and in religion, your names, an affiliation, clanic, and social affiliations were actually religiously marked, knowing that the language was not necessarily the main marker. Between Slavs and Albanians, yes, but not among Slavs. So this is one level in which these were religious in some ways. But this is still very rather banal. The second way in which where religions come into shaping politics is the fact that the last empire, the Yugoslav Empire, was secular, socialist, anti-national, and anti-religious in some ways, but in some complicated ways, it actually, because it was a federal institution, it promoted republican national identities. It gave a lot of power to national elites that actually then took up nationalism, and especially religious type of nationalism, because religions, churches, and mosques were the place of resistance. So in this sense, the wars were religious. But this is a banal way, right? We all know this. In this sense, we can say that these things are actually excesses of a much larger trend in which nations. This is the specificity of the Balkans are based on the religious patterns. In the end of 1990s and later, this is actually after the independencies, after the violence, after the moments in which those groups, those various ethnic religious groups have separated themselves from each other and started to build independent states. This is when religions actually starts to play a much more important role than what we've seen in the first wars, and it's the process of nationalization. Paradoxically, a process that elsewhere has been accompanied with secularization. It's the other case in the Balkans, because religions have become central for national politics, no longer in this sense of being the marker against the others, but in the sense in which all states built their national paraphernalia, their myth, their histories, institutions, languages. So the distinction between Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian is quite tricky. It's not obvious. It has to be produced. And in this process, that actually was very quick. It started in the it has roots into the 19th century, activist roots in the 1970s, but then it was a political project of the 1990s, very quick, something that happened over 10 years in most countries. It differed from country to country, but basically it was very quick. And in this process, the church, meaning the institutions, have played an important role in the sense of being the repositories of historical legacies, symbols. So many of those national symbols were borrowed from religious history. They were also the activists who, they were also the institutions who had the infrastructure. And who could nationalize people very quickly through religious education in schools. So churches and mosques have developed a very close relationship with states, and the states have given them this role of nationalizing, meaning making the ex-Yugoslav subjects of various nationalities, convictions, ideologies into Serbian, Bosnian, Croat subjects, into people who are loyal and who feel identified with the national project, and religion was an important part of it. It is inseparable, and the religion and these nations have then developed a religious-centered definition of the national identity. Not necessarily because of this marker story of the 1990s, but because of the production of nation, because of this complicated process of production of nation. Interestingly, this process have also nationalized the churches or the religious traditions. So now there is a lot of talk about a Croatian church, Crkva u Hrvata, which is kind of specific Catholicism. There is a Bosnian Islam, even though the Croatians and the Bosniaks would not like this term, but this is what actually happens. And there is obviously these autocephaly movements in all over the Balkans, separating patriarchates from larger patriarchates in Montenegro and in Macedonia. So the religions themselves have been nationalized, and they have become institutional, intellectual, discursive, symbolic backbones of the nationalization process. So in this sense, today we have a region that is very much nationalized in this and religized in the sense that everybody now has a single identity, which was not the case before. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people had various identities, sometimes secular, sometimes supranational, sometimes not religious, and now they have national identities that are, these entities are basically exclusive of each other. So in the second sense, religion as institution and as a repository of symbols and also the infrastructural power of an institution that has dioceses or mosques or church, access to a lot of people who actually can work in schools. In this sense, they were the promoters of national identity, and they are inseparable from politics. And now I'm come to the third sense, to the third meaning. I have forgotten to actually, for example, mention whatever we've talked about Poland and also in Czech Republic, the religious investment was also very much emotional, the idea of self-victimization, and also messianic, and sometimes even the nations have had nationalism has an emotional side, and it actually came from history, but it was often, especially among the Croats and the Serbs, and also among Muslims, termed in very religious terms as sacrifice, self-victimization, toxic hope. Some people speak about toxic hope in the situations in which your problems are unresolved, but your nation gives you the horizon that goes beyond your life, and so on. So here, for example, some sacralization or beatification of some important figures was an important process of nationalization. Cardinal Stepinac in Zagreb, or the national memory of the Ustasha killed in Bleiburg has actually been taken up by the church. The church has played a lot of the church in Croatia and elsewhere in different ways. Among the Serbs and Bosniaks and others also has played this important role of giving nation this the new national identity, this emotional side, and this communal side through rituals and political and religious, or political and religious together. So in this sense, the religions in terms of institutions, symbols, and so on are inseparable. And now we have a third situation, or third level in which religions are fused with politics, and this is much more close to what we've heard about Poland. Maybe the second part would be would be somehow parallel to the Hussite story in Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, and now in the last 10 years we are like in Central and Western Europe, and especially here among our neighbors, witnessing a resurgence of neo-nationalism, national conservative nationalism, or authoritarian regimes that actually manipulate and instrumentalize ways in which instrumentalize symbols and discourses and religious issues in order to maintain a certain sort of a political clout over their societies and religions. Again, I will qualify certain parts of the churches or of religion or religion communities are very much part of this authoritarian projects. And not only institutionalized religion, but also, interestingly, a lot of religious activists, meaning lay people or people who are organized in various revisionist, moralizing or conservative groups that actually play an increasing role in the public sphere, especially in moments when the church, for example, seems to lose clout on or access to politics. What changes this kind of relation between politics and religion is the issues. Nation or national identity and development is not the core, but larger issues, civilizational issues. We've seen, especially in Serbia and among the Orthodox, but also among the Muslims and partly also among the Catholics in the Balkans, the salience of various civilizationist discourses that resistance to all these culture wars, gender, gay rights, abortion, Western liberalism, European memory regimes, and so on, have become ways to control, mobilize, polarize public opinion, and religious actors are actually very important, crucial to that, because it wouldn't work without them. This kind of discourse is very often clearly stripped of any ethically binding remnants of religion, and is identitarian in nature, in ways very similar to what we are witnessing in Central Europe, with the difference that in the Balkans it came a bit earlier. It's no longer the institutions and religions as such, but I would say, or at least that's what the critics of this development say. It's the ethno-nationalist groups in the churches, people who actually derive some advantages from this development, either advantages of, for example, influence. So here we see the results of such movement. Saint Sava, a huge new complex dome in Belgrade that is kind of very similar to what you can find in Moscow, the Saint Saviour Church, which actually also was made by Russian, probably by Russian investments and by Russian artists. And actually, it's much nice. I mean, I had enjoyed it much more than the Moscow one, because there is no militaristic dimension to the Serbian one, unlike the Moscow one. But we see a very symbolic closeness between political power and not political power, or not any political power, but the authoritarian leaders that claim this leadership for over a long time. So between Aleksandar Vučić in Serbia, who is receiving Vladimir Putin, and between the Patriarch of Serbia, who is decorating Aleksandar Vučić here, we see the importance of right-wing movements or clericalist neo-fascist movements that are actually present now everywhere, in some way, in certain parts more intensely, like in Serbia and elsewhere less. So, for example, Svetosavlje is a Serbian fascist clerical tradition from the 1930s that has been, or tradition, or small school that has been revived recently, to be part of this new space that has no longer the new political space, that has no longer the aim of building a building nations, but actually the building regimes on this ground. And I will just very skip. It doesn't happen only in Serbia, even though Serbia is probably the most. But we've seen symbolic remaking of authoritarian remaking of Macedonia also, which has now stopped. We've seen something similar, but in a much lighter way, remaking of Muslim countries in the Balkans, where this authoritarian politics is very much borrowed from the Turkish example, but in ways that are not as deep, but they are clearly symbolically similar. So what people speak about conservative revolution linked to the authoritarian turn. So now I'll turn to the last point. This last development has actually been for a lot of people very striking, and also much more a target of a lot of criticism. When we speak about misuse of religion, in the first two cases, it's hard to speak about misuse of religion. In this third sense, or in which religious actors, not religions themselves, and not even whole institutions, but certain religious actors, institutional or lay, actually play this role of propping authoritarian regimes. This comes much more closer to the idea of misuse. It's still difficult to speak about a misuse in the Balkans, because whoever stands against or outside or critical towards this development is very often a small minority. But on the other hand, the Balkans have been secularized in a thorough way during this communist period. So there is a lot of intellectual, theological, political, artistic engagement, criticism, and actually a small scene in which people of various nations, interestingly, in a very ecumenic way, are trying to resist this fusion. It's not criticism. They don't really stay inside. They are facing a hegemony. But this theological resistance has produced, at least to my knowledge, which is limited, and I guess there is much more that I have not seen, a very vivid and dynamic religious field, theological discussions, ecumenic meetings, very grassroots, unorganized, not supported by anyone, in which people in all those countries, actually, especially in the Catholic and Muslim side, in the Orthodox part, it's a bit more different. It's more difficult, in which they try to lay different claims on religion that are not national or ideological, but that are theological. They continue to define religions, their theological traditions, their spiritual traditions, their prophetic traditions in a different way, in contrast to this what they call what they call ethno-religiosity, or the Bermuda Triangle for the in which Balkans are lost, the nexus between religion, nation, and violence. And there is actually a lot of production of criticism, and it would be probably of a lot of interest. And for me, when I am following certain of those intellectuals, theologians, or public intellectuals, or even literary authors, it's actually very interesting. I have once. It's actually very vivid. It's very dynamic. Religion plays an important role. It continues to play an important role. So there is like a very dynamic resistance. I will just. Most recently, the last book was actually dealing exactly with this kind of criticism that was published by a Bosnian Croat theologian. When I travel in the Balkans, and I have once taken theology students or religious students with me to Sarajevo, they were surprised by the dynamism and the engagement and the vividness of religious debates, and they told me, one of them told me, if I if I studied here, I would probably, if I studied here and not at my theological faculty in Prague, I would not lose my face so quickly. But it was kind of a joke. But it shows that the engagement is actually real. So you have a theology plays an important role, also symbolic, not only among theologians themselves, but also there is a sort of a counter public that defines that has a different discourse, and that has also, that actually proves whatever the fusion between religion and politics implies for religions as moral, theological, spiritual, prophetic traditions, that there is a different there is a different way of viewing tradition and viewing religion, and these people actually speak about misuse from this point of view, from this specific point of view, from this specific theological or spiritual or prophetic, as they say, point of view. They clearly intend to continue defining religion as something that is inalienable from, that should be inalienable from politics. So they, for me, they resist this desecularizing tendency. They are all in favor of a secular state, something that is not the reality anymore, and they continue to define religions in this very modern sense, in this very differentiated sense from the rest of society, in which they can be misused, they can be seen as traditions of moral, spiritual, theological, prophetic dimension that cannot and should not be instrumentalized or should not be fused. And in this sense, I find that finally, after all my speech about there is no misuse of religion, there is one perspective that actually would subscribe to this position, this perspective, this phrase in the Balkans, and it's this theological resistance. So thanks.